the effect of the balanced budget amendment on some of the social safety nets, and you specifically referenced Social Security. Now, you know, I'm sitting here addressing three high-powered economists, and I'm just a simple country doctor, but as I understand the Social Security Trust Fund and the way it was designed, now, true enough, the federal government would have great difficulty in having to monetize the debt that we owe to the trust fund, but Social Security payments would continue because they are taken out of the trust fund, not out of the general treasury. Is that correct?
What I was talking about is some of the balanced budget amendments say you cannot spend more in any single year than the revenues coming into the federal government. Then to draw down the trust fund, you're going to have to reduce other spending of the government. I mean, you could. I said it would make it more difficult, especially if you were sort of up at the limit, meaning you had passed appropriation bills and mandatory spending and all that, that equaled, you thought, what Social Security, what the revenue stream would be during the year.
But there's still dollars owed to the trust fund that would be available to pay the beneficiaries Social Security.
Yes, but every dollar you drew, you'd have to draw down some other spending. It's not that it's impossible, it's just that it's more difficult.
Certainly some that would argue that we should have never been spending the money collected for Social Security as general revenue in the first place, that was a mistake to allow the commingling of assets, and were we a private law firm, we might all go to jail for having done that. But at the end of if the trust fund at some point in the future becomes exhausted, what then happens to the benefits paid to people who are receiving Social Security at that point? Are the benefits not limited to the amount of money that's collected with the Social Security tax?
Yes, they are, and I believe under current law, rather than have a, excuse me, a rateable reduction in benefits of something around 25%, as would occur, you delay payments to individuals. I think that's the way the legal structure works.
But there will be consequences.
There certainly will, yes.
And so, I mean, I've not been here a long period of time, but long enough to have lived through the previous administration's discussion of let's do something to improve the long-term solvency of Social Security. It has come up from time to time. It becomes a political football, but in truth, we're not being honest with people by simply saying the status quo will allow these benefits to be paid in perpetuity with no negative consequence to the benefits paid. Is that correct?
You know, that is correct, but I think the trustees' reports, which I have some responsibility for, state that very clearly and have for many years.
Yeah, as you know,
the few people read it. It's not bedtime reading to pick up the trustees' report.
The truth, what the old saying, the lie can get around the world twice before the truth gets a chance to put his pants on, and that is a problem. And yet, despite the political downside, I think this is something which we need to be honestly discussing. And unfortunately, a lot of the rhetoric that surrounds the Ryan budget and Medicare, and a lot of the rhetoric that surrounded when President Bush was talking about trying to save Social Security, it becomes a huge distraction, and Congress hasn't done its work. And as a consequence, some point in the future, there's going to be a very, very serious price to be paid. And I'll just never forget the day 20 years ago when, as a young 40-year-old physician, I'm in an audience listening to Paul Tsongas the day after President Clinton gave his health care speech to a joint session of Congress, not a dry eye in the House, as reported by Senator Tsongas, because President Clinton described 5 new entitlements programs, and we can't pay for the ones that we have now. And if we did not do something in 20 years' time, if we did not do something to address the crisis coming in entitlements, in 20 years' time, there likely could be an intergenerational conflict, the likes of which this country has never seen. Now, 20 years ago, when I was 40, that seems so far off and so theoretic. Why worry about it? The problem is, it's 20 years later, and that time now is at hand. And it is important that this Congress face those facts and deal with those hard problems, because they are not going to be easier 10 years from now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your indulgence. I'll yield back. Unless, Doctor, you wanted to make a comment on that.
Your call for action is one I agree with completely.
There is no substitute for political will in getting our financial house in order. Fiscal rules done right can matter.